Hi guys, Tyler Douglas here. This is my Module 4 Kesa assignment. Pardon my tone of voice and my attire. I'm actually still recovering from surgery. This weekend was actually the first weekend I was able to get up and be active and stay awake for more than 2 or 3 hours at a time. Um, it's been rough, but um, I was able to actually communicate with my boss on Friday to accomplish this assignment. So without further ado, in regards to the Kansas Education System's accreditation for school systems. I don't work in a traditional education environment, which made this a little bit interesting. I was a little bit perplexed as to how I was going to tackle this. Um, I work as a learning content developer for Jet.com, which is an e-commerce company. And essentially, at first I was like, man, this is going to be a little rough. But it ultimately turned out to be something that once you took out the idea that it was for school systems and you applied the 5R framework, it was very applicable to my line of work. So I was able to sit down with my boss we don't have a principal, so he is the operations manager of training and development. So kind of the equivalent of a principal in the sense. The first question, are we this kind of institution, or are we beginning this? There's a good possibility after this discussion. Per our corporate guidelines, we don't have any requirements as to what kind of framework we need to be accredited. Just the internal departments have to sign off on the materials and the process we train, which is actually ties into the first R of the 5Rs. So in regards to relationships, we discussed how important it was for our trainers, myself, our day-to-day manager, him, and the training leads to be on the same page and to have that strong interconnection to ensure that the flow is there, the progress is there, the right process is being communicated. As issues come up, they can be handled. The same thing being said is the different operations within the building, that kind of relationship that is handled amongst them, and the emphasis that we put on that to make sure that ultimately, if we are able to put out the appropriate relationship with all of our external connections, our other operations, to ensure that the right things are being trained, the right materials are being used, the process is up to date, and we keep our team up to date, then we're creating a high-performing environment for our trainers to teach these new students. Relevance, that ties into that as well. The relevance of our materials, it's very important. We live in a very changing environment. We have an 800,000 square foot warehouse that they're constantly moving different racking, relabeling, rezoning things. So it's important to ensure that the materials are up to date. There are software updates that we have to keep up to date to ensure that that curriculum's there. So there's process changes, there's software changes that we need to be aware of so that we can adequately teach the trainees. We need to make sure that we have the same technology that they'll have out on the floor, out in the training department. In regard to responsive culture, this is something that we've had to be super adaptive of. As we're a support department, we have to flex and work with other departments to take suggestions, improve different processes, make changes as they go. But at the same time, we have a heavy say with our team. What they can do to influence their trainees, what their suggestions are to make the materials better, so on and so forth, to ensure that everything is at a level where it can be properly taught and no one person is teaching it differently and it's not falling behind. And then rigor, we're constantly working at it. It's never set. Again, I spoke to relevance. We're updating the materials every week. We add new processes every week. The software changes. So we're constantly trying to make sure that we make this material, this program, this flow as best as possible. And so that is essential for us to continue to build upon our current training program, our current curriculum, and ensure that we have the right materials. At the same time, we need to test the effectiveness of this. So the data behind it, the performance metrics that associates put out from these materials, how can we make them better? If they're not getting X number by X date, what can we do from our end? So utilizing that data to improve upon that. ultimately, following that process, we'll have the results of knowing how effective our training is. And we'll be able to build upon each and every one of the four to get to the fifth, which is results, to help that individual learner have the best possible experience, to be engaged, to have the little amount of ramp up time to become successful, and ultimately roll over, as we have temp employees at Jet, roll over to become a full-time Jet head because of their performance, because they had adequate training.